This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Full-fledged, ready to go, rocking and rolling with my man, Mr. Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What is good, my brother?
You know what it is, man. Fresh out of NYC, back home in South Florida. It was great to see you up there. For those who don't know, got to see my brother celebrate his upcoming birthday. Really excited about that. I appreciate those vibes with you and the missus. But we back here, man. And NBA talk is always percolating and popping off. NBA Cup, the whole nine. But we got a special show as always in store for our friends and listeners, bro.
Well, I certainly appreciate you making your way up there in order to catch it. It was definitely a great time to be had. Good vibes, good conversations. Yeah, man, and it put everything in proper perspective, not only about our friendship, but more importantly, just all the things that we have in common and things that we share and stuff like that. So, of course, one of the things that we love to share is our perspective about what's been going on with the NBA, which has been very topsy-turvy. A lot of teams, coming out of the woodworks and surprising us and things of that nature. And I think it's all good, man. It's exactly what the NBA needs. Someone was actually, talking about, said, what do you think? The NBA's ratings are going to go up and things of that nature. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know if the ratings ever really went down. I think it's expected that when you move to like this new streaming apparatus and you deviate from what you've had over the last, 2-3 decades of coverage, that there's expected, a slip in what that, viewership is supposed to feel and look like. But I do think that the rollout and the product and the competitive nature by which these teams are playing so far this season, I think has lent itself to it being very exciting and I think very watchable.
Absolutely, very watchable. I will say it's a little difficult for me to, find games. I think at times, what is this? Oh, I got to log out of this app or whatever. So if you don't have your app stuff connected, it can be a little troublesome. But I've gotten the hang of it here now, 15, 20 games into the season to kind of know where everything is going to be. And I think the way that the game is being described, and we've touched on this maybe a couple of times before, but the way the game is being described is really being celebrated. You know what I mean? As opposed to just always being so controversial. And I'm seeing so many different shifts and things like that. Even how NBA TV is covering and showcasing the product is actually very reminiscent of what we do. It's very kind of like podcast style, right? And a lot of people virtual, not even everyone always in studios. But if they are in studios, they're sitting at couches with mics around them and just trying to just kind of kicking it and talking it. So that's the vibe I think the NBA is going for. It's absolutely coming across. And I think it's resonating, in the ratings and also with, kind of viewers of all ages, really, because we're of a certain age and we understand a certain aspect of how the game used to be covered for how it was covered. And we're getting back to, I think, just the essence of enjoying the basketball, which is something that I can always appreciate.
I'm just hoping that we get to ourselves to a point where we could have that baseline watch party and be able to chill and talk and conversate about, some of these matchups that are taking place because they're worthwhile. And it doesn't have to be manufactured and produced. It really just be organic conversational talk from what you're actually seeing and being able to kind of be in the moment of, where the game is viewed, from the person, not just who is podcasting, but also from those that are in the center of where the cameras are eyeing, where the players are competing and things of that nature. I think it brings it all together and brings it all in perspective.
Yeah, 1000%. And so, as the season continues to push on, we look forward to the way the game will be covered and also everyone's takes on it as well, too. But podcasting and streaming, all these are an art form that the NBA has adopted with so many players dipping their toe into the podcasting waters as well. It gives a different way and a different flavor for how the game is being covered and touched on. So I'm excited by it, and the baseline has been a part of this ethos for, over a decade. And we continue to be here, continue to rock. And that's why we have another great show in store for our fans listeners here today.
I think people who are probably wondering, it's what do we do? What do you discuss? I mean, listen, there's obviously a lot going on. NBA Emirates Cup is happening. But I think our focus is going to be specifically on two teams that I really didn't think a lot of people had pegged to be in the position that they're currently in. Now, whether or not it's sustainable, I mean, that's up for the conversation that we are about to have. But two teams particularly that I think a lot of people felt like they could be going in completely different directions, different dynamics, but they have quality core players that help tilt the scales. But why these teams are successful, I think, is what is allowing us to be able to sit down and have a conversation. So in a few moments, we'll put our attention to the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers, and why these two teams are in the positions that they're in, respectively, in the upper echelons of their conferences. And so I think it's a good conversation to be had. And especially for those who are Celtics fans and Lakers fans, our boy Jabari, he would be like through the moon, ready to hop on and make sure that he says what our team is doing is sustainable. You guys, right? But that's what that's what allows for the banter to be had between the two franchises. I will say though, Shaw, I do find it cute how when recently the Lakers and the Celtics played, how they felt so compelled to have to like really push that, the rivalry, the old great Lakers Celtic rivalry. Like it really had to be discussed because these two teams played each other in, November, December of the year. It's a little too much.
What I will say though, with the Lakers and Celtics is that with the new broadcast team stepping into the space, that's probably what's really trying to get back into it, right? Because if I remember that game, I think was on Prime, and not like on ESPN or whatever, like, a network hadn't been kind of covering this for X amount of years. So if Prime or NBC is going to get that game, they're going to try to rehype it, you know what I mean? Just as it's kind of like back on their radar. But a lot of air was taken out of that game because LeBron didn't play, and I think Luka didn't play or something like that. So, like, it just didn't have the same oomph as the Lakers were in a stretch of like multiple games on the road and five games in 7 nights type of situation. But ultimately, we're here now to discuss these two teams that are maybe not ahead of schedule, maybe in too early to kind of get into that level of conversation. But at least to my eye, maybe a little bit of surprise. But we'll figure out if it's kind of fool's gold or if these things are two sustainable teams that are to be heard from in the respective conferences.
So coming up, Sean and I will get into the digs discussing the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. But as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at the Warren Shaw. You can get at me at Game Face Lead. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all major platforms. You can go to www.thebaselinenba.com in order to catch not just this episode, but also the plethora of episodes that we enjoy rolling out for your listening pleasures. And if you're catching us on the YouTube channel, we'd like to say hello to you and yours. And if you see the blue and white logo, that's the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So be sure to check out not just us, but also our peoples from the 19 Media Group family. You can go to www.19mediagroup.com. Coming up, Sean and I will get right into the digs regarding two teams that are successfully elevating themselves in their conference, the conversation of the Lakers and Celtics. But first, this episode of The Baseline is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the holiday season, the best time of the year for sports. Bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, what games to watch, there is one place where it feels good to be right, and that's Prize Picks. This basketball season, I've been having a blast making lineups. It's super simple and quick. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you get them right, you can cash in. You can even use the new stacks feature to pick up the same player 3 times in one lineup, like more on Steph's points, 3-pointers, and assists. I've been checking out projections for Kevin Durant, Luka Dončić, and Tyrese Maxey lately. And trust me, seeing your takes hits is the chef's kiss. Oh, let's also talk about the new feature Prize Picks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. With Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Coming up, Sean and I discuss Lakers and Celtics. Don't go anywhere. We are back. Howdy, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And first thing we want to go ahead and focus our attention on is going to be the Los Angeles Lakers. And by all accounts, I know a lot of people were very high, I guess maybe more so on whether or not this would be the year that Luka is going to kind of be and supplant himself in the MVP conversation throughout the year. regardless of whether they do or they don't have LeBron James. But I do think that the reason why we're going to probably have this conversation about the Los Angeles Lakers and the MVP conversation is the Lakers right now currently sit as the second best team in the Western Conference, which is quite remarkable when you consider the level of competition that is already in that Western Conference, right? So, much can be said about, whether or not Luka is going to wind up being that MVP guy, but can definitely tell you this: the emergence of Reaves, the contributions from Ayton, Hayes, and the rest of that Lakers squad, even while LeBron James was out, I just think makes them a very formidable team. And then I think the only outlying question is this real or is this fugazi? That what we're seeing from this team, can they continue to keep doing this, especially against the top tier competition in the Western Conference?
Yeah, as Lakers have come into the forefront, one of the things that stood out in the early part of the season, as we record, they're 8-0 in clutch games. And so for a team to be able to pull out these close games in the way that they have so far this early season, you'd think that bodes well. And that's because they have a Luka, they have an Austin Reaves who's burst onto the scene, who's knocking on the door of being an all-star this year. And obviously the greatness of LeBron James coming back to it. But where people are skeptical is the fact that their net rating is not all that amazing. That's only like 2.2. And so that net rating makes them feel like, well, they're always in close games. Doesn't mean you're always going to win these close games. Like, they're not going to be 8-0, but they do have two of the greatest basketball mind computers in the modern day on one team that can also manufacture wins if they are able to keep things close. The one thing, though, is that they're not good defensively. 20th in defensive rating, and they are one of the worst teams in terms of being able to just defend people. So 24th in field goal percentage against right now. That's something that where if you were trying to say like, hey, this is not sustainable, like just going to outscore you, or try to keep it close enough so that they can out-execute you with two of the greatest players to ever play the game in the final 5 minutes, common logic would say that that's not a viable path forward. Common logic would say that, but Luka and LeBron are not common by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that's where you kind of get into the juxtaposition of whether or not you feel like this Lakers team is really this good. And part of this too is Austin Reaves really this good? Is he that dude? Because I made my prediction earlier in the year saying that, hey, I thought LeBron James would be the best Robin in the NBA. Austin Reaves is Robin on the Lakers now. And so that, LeBron gets to play an overqualified Alfred, if you will, if you want to utilize the Batman reference, an analogy. But this Lakers team is really, really surprising a lot of teams with the way they're able to execute. And obviously it's felt Luka is playing the best basketball of his young career.
So there's two things that I think really stand out to me about, what we're seeing. One, obviously, Austin Reaves, right? I think that stands out. I don't think you would question, this kind of effort and performance from Luka, given what he had to do to get to this point, right? Like the transformation of his body. There is a better emphasis for him to be a better defender, right? Like I see it. It doesn't necessarily, like, just because the team is not where they need to be defensively does not negate the fact that if he has actually made an effort to play better defensively, that it shows. I think sometimes we harp too much on, like, what are we comparing to saying that this guy actually took time out to play better defense? Sometimes it's just a matter of effort, or sometimes it's a matter of, learning the X's and O's and being where you need to be. And if it's a question of, well, I'm just still not physically fast enough, I'm not, savvy enough in order to execute that defensive skill set the way it needs to be done, doesn't mean that you're not in a position to continue to improve on those things. It's when you don't want to do it or you don't show the effort to do it that becomes the problem. So we can make, we can have kind of the argument about, yes, the Lakers are not where they typically are under a LeBron James led team defensively. But I'll make this kind of an analogy or this comparison. In the NFL, you have the Dallas Cowboys, which people will say with their offense, they should basically outplay everybody. But their defense is atrocious. Their defense can't stop anybody. They say, hey, if you could just give me a decent defense, if you just give me a defense that looks like they can at least hold back the other team from scoring, or maybe stop a drive once or twice, this team might actually be good enough offensively to get you to the promised land. And I think that's where we can kind of have that conversation with the Lakers right now. Are they, in comparison to what they used to be defensively over the last few years, even with JJ Redick as their head coach? No. But if they're comparable and they continue to score the way that they're scoring and be as effective as they are, this very much could be sustainable. You know, it's not all worldly, but we're not talking about whether or not they're going to usurp what we're seeing from the Oklahoma City Thunder. What we're talking about is, can their style of play counter what the Oklahoma City Thunder does defensively? And can they do something defensively that other teams have managed to do sometimes against the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is show that how ineffective they are. And I think that there's a possible conversation to be had if this is what we're seeing from the Lakers consistently and for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I'm not as down as I think some of the naysayers are, who are pointing out the things that I'm talking about in terms of their defensive rating, and their field goal percentage against, and then their net rating, like only being 2.2, which is ranks 14th in the league. So I understand those things, but I think sometimes basketball is more than the numbers. And I think, as you alluded to, Luka is playing with effort that we haven't seen before. Yes, he's also averaging the most amount of points per game as we record, in his career at 35 a game, which is literally absurd. But he literally looks unstoppable out there. And I talk about this all the time in the years that we've had our show, situational defense. And so if they're playing good situational defense and keeping games close, well then, yeah, I trust LeBron and Luka in the clutch moments of games against, I'd say, at least 28 other teams, maybe save OKC and maybe, a Kevin Durant, and in Houston or whatever the case may be. Like, oh, where I trust what's going to happen. Sorry. And maybe a Jokic or whatever, right? But everybody else, I'd be like, all right, I would lend towards the LeBron and Luka figuring out to kind of eke out that W if the game is close in the final minutes. And I think JJ Redick understands what he has in this roster. Yes, he wants them to play better and more consistent defense, but he's getting guys to buy in a way to all play their roles. Marcus Smart still hasn't really found his stride, and not that he's going to be like this, with the bullet defender that's going to change everything for them. But I do feel like they are trending in the right direction, and they have the parts and pieces, and they could always make a move if need be. They still have a draft pick or two, which they could trade out of. But again, to me, this is not so much about Luka taking the leap in terms of committing to his body and what everyone kind of saw the season coming. To me, this still so much still in the back of Austin Reaves becoming a juggernaut, like a true juggernaut, and also a killer in the final and clutch minutes as well too. While I talk about LeBron and Luka in the clutch, Austin Reaves has won 2 game winners. Has hit 2 game winners already this year for them as well. Like, this is something that is found money in a lot of ways, or maybe the Lakers always knew they had it. But either way, this trio is really, really amazing right now. And I think they're going to be heard from the majority part of the regular season. They're not in the same tier as OKC because literally nobody is, but they are a contender in the Western Conference, more than I gave them credit for coming into this at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you think LeBron is passing the torch? And when I say that, I mean not passing the torch to Luka. I think Luka's taken it. I think one of the things that I questioned more was about when LeBron comes back, does the savagery of Luka, the aggressiveness of Luka, does that temper down? My question is LeBron ready to pass the torch to Austin? And when I say that in relation to JJ Redick and the dependency that he has on LeBron getting shots, getting opportunities. Like, can Austin Reaves legitimately become the second primary option? LeBron taking a back seat at times, but still exhibiting the same, IQ, same, like he's always been that kind of guy where he can placate himself from first, second to third. But I think he's always done it with hesitancy because he can see that the guys that play below him or at his level, they don't rise to the occasion. So then therefore it forces him to step in. I just wonder, do you think that he believes that he could pass the torch to a guy like Austin Reaves who can be this offensively fluent and taking that burden off of LeBron, or do you think he still needs to step in and be the 2?
I think, time has come for LeBron and perspective has come for LeBron as well. And I would have said coming into the season, he saw the writing on the wall that Luka had taken number one role, and the Lakers are placating more to Luka than they are to him. LeBron probably felt very much like he was a number two going into the season. Sciatica, side rails his season. Austin Reaves steps up and is proven to be more ready than a lot of us were expecting. And I can't speak for LeBron. I'm not in his head, but I would guess maybe even LeBron was like, oh, no, okay, this is what we're doing. Like Austin Reaves is ready for that level of responsibility, raising his PPG 8 points, since from last year, from 20 to 28 right now. Oh, okay. Well, this reframes what my role needs to be. And while LeBron does have, the ego of the greatest player of all time, that's what's in his head. He also understands that the game does change. And he also understands that, hey, I've been looking for somebody to pass the mantle to her. Or whether or not Luka came and took it from him, but Austin Reaves is now also more ready to assume those roles, which allows LeBron to throttle down and do different things per se, and not have to bear the offensive scoring load, doesn't have to bear the playmaking scoring load. He can pick his spots more poignantly. Where I'd like to see him have more effort now is obviously on the defensive side, but he's 41, going to be 42 years old. So maybe those things are to be expected. It's a long-winded way of saying that I think LeBron had a plan coming in. Sciatica benched him and also made him reevaluate what his role could potentially be. Now, again, in the game versus Philly, as we're recording, he played like vintage LeBron. Austin Reaves had a terrible night. So I think he will always have that in his back pocket. But I think he is more willing to let it be Austin Reaves' time now than he was 25 games ago, coming into the NBA season.
Speaks volumes to his recognition of that. Because to your point, when he's had to be this way, we've thought of it as being selfish, or we've thought of it as just, this is kind of like a LeBron dig. There's a end game to what he's trying to do. And it may not necessarily be quote unquote in the best interest of everyone. Now, I'm saying that's what we're saying. I'm saying that's what's perceived, right? And we can call that out, and even he will probably tell you if you ever had to do a documentary after the fact, he'll probably admit to it 10 times over if he had to, right? Because it's all code. But I think in the grand scheme of things, about when it's winning and you're trying to tap into getting the most out of your players who are going to be your X factors. I mean, let's just call it a buck. There are going to have to be some X factor players here. Austin Reaves, maybe a couple of years ago, was someone that you could call as an X factor player. But now he's going to be a difference maker. He's going to have to be a difference maker, because when you do look at the other teams that the Lakers are going to have to go against, they need that third. They need that third person, whether it's the pure score, the raw score, or the elevated IQ. He may not score or dominate like LeBron and Luka does, but an Austin Reaves, 28-point night makes a difference. You know what I'm saying? But I think this year, Shaw, it's not a question of the confidence if Austin Reaves can be that guy and measure up to that guy. It's how many times over can he do it? And then the only other time to prove that would then eventually be in the playoffs, right? Or against the upper echelon competition, putting those numbers up against the better defenses or the teams that in which the matchups don't favor Luka or don't favor LeBron, because they figured them out, and then putting the onus on an Austin Reaves to go out there and to basically, Luka Bron them or Bron Luka them. You know what I mean? Like that to me, I think is becoming one of those key elements. And listen, that's a good problem to have if you're JJ Redick, that you start to go down your list and you can actually tap into and rely on some of those other guys, DeAndre Ayton's. You still have reliable guys like Rui Hachimura. When I say reliable, I mean they still come in and they still give you meaningful minutes, right? And they seem to fit in, find a way to give relevance to the roles that they play for what the Lakers are doing. I think that speaks volumes.
No, it absolutely does. And, knowing that their worst loss of the season technically was to, the OKC Thunder, that was without LeBron, in that game. As I said earlier, nobody's on their level. So their standing here in the Western Conference is that of an upper echelon team. I don't know that most people at this point would say that they're better than Denver or maybe even Houston. And I would challenge that notion. I think the Lakers are right there. I really do. I just, again, OKC so far above everybody else, but to say the Lakers could not contend with Denver or Houston in a 7-game matchup, especially with the trio that we continue to mention, DeAndre Ayton learning to play his role and just be, hey, I can be a guy who's just 14 and 10, whatever, and get you a block and just do kind of some of the dirty work, in addition to auxiliary play from the Marcus Smarts, Rui Hachimura's, Hayes, and everybody else that you've already mentioned. So to me, they are right there to if somebody were to fall and slip or whatever the case to be, OKC just has guys in abundance. Their second and third string guys can be starters on most people's teams, so to speak. But to me, the Lakers are going to be heard from. And those who are kind of doubting that, and I'm not a Laker fan by any stretch of the imagination, that to me just seems a little foolhardy, I think, with what they've shown us. And what even, quite frankly, what JJ Redick has shown us as his ability to coach and get guys to buy in as well, too. Like, he's as big a part of this turnaround and success, if you will, maybe not turnaround, but, the overall success as anything else. Obviously, getting Luka is a huge boom, but JJ's figured things out and put people in places, in essence, to be successful. So if they make a move on the periphery that gets them another defender, or even another, kind of backup big that upgrades, the Jackson Hayes situation behind Ayton, I can't see why they wouldn't be a very potent team and a team that nobody would really want to play in the Western Conference.
One thing will probably not be discussed is whether or not we think JJ Redick had an influence, especially in Luka Dončić's offseason transformation. And I believe that he does. I mean, by all accounts, if you look at JJ Redick is probably still one of the more, fit, athletic, conditioned, type guys. And he was a savage, man. I mean, he was a savage. He believed that, obviously not to the level and into the scrutiny that LeBron does, but I'm sure that he believed that, you don't do it on your own. You lean into, those people and you access and you network. And I think there's a high likelihood that that's part of why there's a lot of trust there, that JJ was able to spend the requisite amount of time with the guys that he needed to spend time with to really lean in and make sure that they believe in what he's doing as a coach, as well as what he believes that his team can do as well, too. And I think you're kind of seeing that in the early outset with this early level success that you're seeing from the Los Angeles Lakers. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll focus our attention to the Eastern Conference now, who are, you know what I'm saying, green with envy a little bit there in Boss Mass, right? Them Celtics, man, what are they doing? What is the recipe for their success? We'll try to dig into that. Don't go anywhere here on The Baseline.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with Exquisite Travel and Tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We're back, Callie Warnshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and now we will focus our attention, quite proudly, I will say, but we'll focus our attention on a team that, listen, the beginning of our previews, for the season, we did not have high expectations for the Boston Celtics, right? And it's not even so much the fact that when we say this, people think, oh, well, it's clearly because the Jayson Tatum is down. Yes, because Jayson Tatum is down. Like, he's you're literally your best offensive player, right? You're all around guy that pretty much in most cases over the last couple of years, people are just like, if you had to choose between him and Jaylen Brown, a lot of people would choose, Jayson Tatum. Me, I'd have personally taken, Jaylen Brown. But collectively together, this is why we have had the level of success that we've had for so long. You lose one of those pieces, I don't care who you are as a team, you are going to struggle. This is flat out. You're the best player that's remaining. He is going to struggle because defenses are going to hone in on him and try to stop him. Well, that's not stopped him, and that's not stopped Joe Mazzulla from still putting together a competitive basketball team. This Boston Celtics team, as we are recording, rides third in the Eastern Conference. And while the Eastern Conference is not anywhere near the level of that of the Western Conference, the fact that the Celtics are among one of those top teams in the conference speaks boldly about how they have been able to weather the storm for as long as they've been weathering the storm in the first quarter of the season, and has shown this level of competitiveness that we didn't think that was gonna necessarily help them, but certainly wasn't gonna put them in a position for us to buy into what the other players are currently doing. And because of that, now we can focus our attention on those other players, especially with the kind of performances that we're getting from Jaylen Brown.
I think that's a great place to start, right? Jaylen Brown has, acquitted himself as an all NBA talent once again so far in the earlier part of the season. And it was rough. Like, they started off 0-3, and we're like, oh, well, this is maybe not that good of a basketball team. They lost a crushing first game to the 76ers with VJ Edgecombe going absolutely bonkers on them in a rookie debut, then lose to the Knicks, and then lost to the Pistons in a relatively competitive game. But those were losses nonetheless. And you're just saying, like, all right, well, what's happening? Derek White and Peyton Pritchard started the season, just not able to shoot the basketball for whatever reason. But Joe Mazzulla has been steadfast, and he's tinkered with the lineup. Yes, Pritchard, White, and Jaylen Brown have consistently started. Kata, when available, has also started. But that fifth starter has been a rotating, kind of puzzle piece as Joe tries to figure out what makes the most amount of sense in there. He's like, hey, are you going to rebound? Are you going to defend? Because we don't need you to score. We've gotten that figured out. And this Celtics team has really started to turn things around in a way that, I think we had them as playing, right? 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. At no point did I figure this team could be vying for any sense of home court advantage. And yes, the rest of the conference has kind of come back to them, so to speak. Cleveland is just not as good as, at least right now, and I guess they're battling injuries, but Cleveland is not as good as many would have hoped. Atlanta hasn't taken the bull by the proverbial horns. Orlando started off just as slow as Boston did. So it's allowed for a lot of kind of not necessarily, not even mediocrity, but it's allowed for a lot of parity within the Eastern Conference. And Boston is currently riding a really great streak where their offense is really, really clicking. And as I bring the graphic up on stage, they're 4th in offensive rating and 7th in net rating. And when they win big because those threes fall, right? And that's the one thing that we said, all right, is Joe going to change the formula some because he doesn't have the same guys out there? The threes are still flying. They're not first in three-point shooting, or first in three-point attempts or third, but they are first in makes. And so, especially with White and Pritchard now really starting to find their range and hit those shots, the offense is really, really clicking in that way in terms of the overall efficiency. But they're 30th in pace, and they still have they do still struggle to rebound the basketball. Hence the revolving door between Josh Minot and now Jordan Walsh and Sam Hauser, all these other guys who've tried to play that fifth starter position for the Boston Celtics. But Joe Mazzulla deserves a hell of a job for getting this team to where they are right now. And Jaylen Brown, like I said, I think to me has got to be in consideration for an all NBA team this season.
I agree with you 100% about the Jaylen Brown piece. I think the reason why the makes are happening is because Jaylen Brown is making shots, and they don't even necessarily have to be the threes. I think the key has been his ability to penetrate the opposing defense and open up the floor more and give as many opportunities and looks for Pritchard, for White, for Hauser as possible. That doesn't mitigate or change the fact that this team is going to continue to struggle to rebound the basketball, and probably makes them feel like, damn, we still wish we had Porzingis at the very least. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting conundrum to have, right? Because me, Shaw, the three is good to a point, right? You start playing against teams that are going to force you away from the three, you eventually have to make your way down to the basket. And what scares me is, outside of Jaylen Brown, while there is a little heady and savvy play that you can get from Pritchard and from White, and maybe even some of the other role players, there still doesn't seem to be a plan in place of being aggressive below the 3-point line. And if if you're going to play, if your pace is going to be 30th, that means you're almost, kind of putting yourself in a half court set and half court game, right? So my whole concern is going to be when those threes, again, and part of those struggles in those 3 games is the fact that they were jacking up threes and not making them. At some point, you got to get to the free throw line. You got to make perimeter shots. Do you have the personnel to do those things when the threes are not falling during certain portions of the game? And Mazzulla has done a very good job of putting the roster together to help mitigate suffering for not doing that. But I still tend to wonder if when that completely goes away, if you got guys that are going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point. So, I mean, things that will back up your statement. They're 30th in free throw attempts and free throws in general, which means they're not getting fouled because they're not in the paint, because they're also 28th in points in the paint this year. So, third from last, if you will, in terms of getting to the rim and scoring at a regular basis. However, they are 5th in offensive rebounding, which is giving them some opportunities to get some second chance points. But Jaylen Brown is killing people from within the mid range. Yes, he's shooting 5 threes a game and making like 2.3 of those. But for the most part, he's taking 15 or 16 twos per game. He's the mid range assassin that Boston has. But again, it's mid range. It's not stuff in the paint. It's not all these paint touches. There's not a lot of drive into the paint and kick out type offenses that is being run here right now in Boston. So I think it was always kind of the thought process here, right? It's like, hey, when the threes fall, yeah, then they will have a chance to win. And we're seeing the threes start to fall, especially in the stretch that they're in right now. But yeah, is there going to be a counter? And the one thing that, I don't want to jump to this point right now too, because there's obviously the Jayson Tatum question that's going to come up here in a little bit. But it's, do they have somebody else who's going to do the dirty work and kind of get in there? Kata is an offensive rebounding guy. He's going to get stuff off of like lob threats and kind of like garbage points per se, but you're not running offense for him to post up. But they're not having guys drive into the lane and finish, on a regular basis. Peyton Pritchard is actually sneakily good at that. It can kind of like get his body into people and then hit it like a little leaner. Derek White, I think at times, but they're so very much settled into 3. And where I was hoping maybe they get maybe a little bit more oomph off the bench, it was with Anthony Simons. But Simons has fallen into the 3-point love situation, and Mazzulla has fallen out of love with Simons because he doesn't play any defense. So Simons' minutes have been very inconsistent for the Celtics this year. It was making Simons a very prime candidate for a potential trade. And I'm going to throw this out there too, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but I was listening to something today, and I was like, wow, if the Clippers were decide to pivot from what they were trying to do, Simons for Zubac and some filler would make some sense. And I'm like, holy hell, because I don't know if Boston really expected for this to be the gap year that maybe all of us expected to. But if it's not, and if you can bring in Zubac for whatever filler you needed to for Simons' contract, you get the rim protection, you get the rebounding, you get the post threat offensively that you can throw the ball down to and get into as well too. And then that would make the Celtics very, very interesting. I think the Eastern Conference, whether Tatum came back or not, but that's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But yeah, I wanted to address that because I thought those were great points by you. They really don't do anything when it comes to getting to the rim.
And I do think that by you not wanting to get into the weed of those things, I thought maybe you were just trying to give me my Christmas present ahead of time, right? Like that's just what I was thinking. I think it makes the most sense. I think that if between the teams that you're telling me, if we had to make a deal or a move, right? Necessity. If you're the Celtics and someone like a Zubac is available for you, you do that regardless of whether or not you're in contention or not in contention. Because if the idea is that you're going to keep him around for the following season, now you've got Zubac, you've got Brown, and you've got Tatum, and you've got opportunity and time for these guys to work in the offseason for them to really click. And that to me is kind of like Porzingis on steroids. You know what I mean? Like what you got from Porzingis was because of his ability to shoot the 3, but you never per se had like the complete physicality that and he didn't have to be, because that physicality came from Jaylen Brown. That physicality came from Drew Holiday and Jayson Tatum. Like there were other guys that shared the load of unloading against the opposition. That's what made them a championship winning team a few seasons ago. They lost a lot of that. They just did. Even the following year, they lost a lot of it. They weren't as physical, and they did not defend and protect the three as much as they wanted to take their threes. I think with someone like Zubac, you get that back a little bit with his length. He doesn't have to score. He doesn't score the basketball with that perimeter efficiency that you got from Porzingis. But if you're getting that now from Jaylen Brown, if you're getting that when Jayson Tatum comes back, then you don't need all of that for Zubac. But what you can get from Zubac in that kind of lineup, that would be. And to your point, Shaw, it cures a lot of the ills that we're saying is still outstanding about the Boston Celtics, even as they're winning right now. Okay, so Mazzulla's pushing the right buttons, putting the Luka Garzas in there, putting Keita in there, Hauser in there, and I mean, they've got a bunch of 6'7", 6'8" guys. They still have Boucher. They got Shireman. They unloaded Walsh. There's like an article I'm reading. I was just reading a moment ago saying this kid Jordan Walsh, this kid's career has been saved. Because he looked like he's just gonna forever be in the G League. But he's playing with his length. Like most of these guys are either playing with their girth, their physicality, or they're playing with their length. And I think that is what's extending those minutes for to stay on the floor for Mazzulla. He is figuring out ways to utilize those assets that those players have, because they don't completely fall in just one star player that the Celtics had when they had their previous rosters. It doesn't mean that they're as deep a team as you're going to talk about with others out there, like the Oklahoma City Thunder or anything, but their contributions are meaningful, and Mazzulla is helping to make them meaningful.
Yeah. So I'm going to unpack everything we just said, and douse water on it all. Despite how well they've played, despite how well things look, even in a weakened Eastern Conference, and I think we definitely agree on this, I do not want to see Jayson Tatum back this year. And there are thoughts that, well, if they are playing this well, and let's say they were to make a move, it doesn't need to be Zubac or whatever, but let's say they make a move to shore up the front court in some other capacity, that, okay, well then, yeah. And if you can get Tatum back and he's 75 or 80% of himself, then, hey, you know what? Then you should really do that. Eastern Conference is yours for the taking. I just don't think it's worth the risk. Fine. This is not a gap year. They're not going to get a top 3 or 5 draft pick. Okay. That's fine. But you do not risk, the career of Jayson Tatum on this year, because right now, to me, not because you're afraid of what any other team is doing out there, but it's just like you're not that level of contender, And I think you want to be able to build continuity, make sure everybody's up to health and up to snuff, in terms of their overall, camaraderie and chemistry, before you make any type of kind of drastic decisions in that vein that could really put your team at jeopardy. Yes, anything can happen at any given time, but Tatum coming back this year, the fact that it's still a conversation, a piece that, they list him on the injury report, I think almost every game, not going to play with KCB. And then all of a sudden, sometime in February, March, maybe he's going to move up to doubtful to probable. Those things concern me. And I wish, the Celtics and Tatum would just say, you know what, it's cool. Do whatever, just rehab, bro. Just rehab. I don't even care what level of super surgeon he had that was able to accelerate the timeline and whatever cryotherapy and things that are going on are allowing his body to heal at this miraculous pace. It just doesn't make sense. And I wish they would just kill it and leave it alone and let the season play out for the good season that it has been.
But that's not what's going to happen, because they're going to curry favor to what the player actually wants to do. Because I would have made the argument that why are we even playing Jaylen Brown, right? Last season, in the middle of a disappointing season, to say the least, with them getting knocked out of the second round by the Knicks, it was revealed that Jaylen Brown was injured, right? I believe it was a slight meniscus tear.
Yeah.
And yet he's playing this season. And I'm just like, what are we doing? You gutted the team, essentially. Why are we playing these two guys who clearly need the rest? I'm not saying that, players should not, can't play through injuries or anything like that. But what we're talking about is an extended career for players. And the wear and tear is not necessarily when the organization makes those kind of moves, taking players that they spent a couple of seasons playing with. And then, for whatever reason, you got the team. They're no longer the team that you won the championship with, and they're no longer the team that you just finished playing in the playoffs with. And you're expecting them to still go out there and compete and do a whole bunch of things. The only silver lining to this whole situation that I'm seeing from this is from Jaylen Brown is this version of Jaylen Brown coupled with the return of Jayson Tatum, I think can be a good thing for the Boston Celtics moving forward, and any decisions that Brad Stevens does make on how he is going to continue to build that roster up. Because we had that same conversation a few years ago on whether or not you should break this tandem up if they were not going to get the job done. And sometimes part of that is allowing a player to flourish outside of the element that he's been comfortable in. And that's what you're seeing with Jaylen Brown. He is flourishing to be the all-NBA player because he doesn't have to lean on, or he doesn't have the ability to lean on Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum, on the other hand, I think realizing Jaylen Brown could be that guy. If Jayson Tatum ever aspires to be an MVP kind of guy, he's got to elevate himself even more. The only way to do that is you got to have that guy next to you taking his game up to that next level and that level of competitiveness. And maybe taking that time off will allow him to do it. But I wish that we were not in this haste, mentality to bring a player back after the injury that Jayson Tatum suffered, just because there's this glimmer of their ability to probably be a top 5 seeded team, or wherever they may land by the time the trade deadline goes, that you do that because you're expecting him to come back because he's doing this miraculous recovery. To me, for the purposes of the season itself, I don't see where that's a good thing for the Celtics.
Right. And had it gone differently, if they were, as we record, like 9-15 instead of 15-9, it's just a different conversation. Like it just is, like, and you're framing things completely different. But right now, like, they're on the plus side. They have some signature wins. They've beaten the Cleveland, they've beaten the Detroit as well. They've beaten the Knicks. And these are all things like, all right, whatever. They squandered that game against Philly, which I talked about. They had a terrible loss to Utah. They should have beat Minnesota. So, like, they've had a lot of things kind of go against them, and, they could even have a better record than what we've seen right now. I have to give Mazzulla, again, just another tip of the cap, because he understands what his team needs, and he's pushing all the right buttons there. But I think them tanking and or taking a gap here was maybe a fool's errand that none of us really should have been on. Like, this is not who Mazzulla was going to be. It's not who Jaylen Brown was going to be. And the Celtics are, a team that is going to fight and be in the thick of things here in the Eastern Conference.
My last point to what you're just talking about, though, Shaw, is I'm giving Mazzulla credit because he is wholeheartedly playing the players. He's not dancing with these guys. He's not bringing them in, taking them out because of circumstances of injuries and things like that. He's playing the players, okay? And it's the players' responsibility to earn those minutes and earn their keep, and we can see that. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes that would be hard pressed for other coaches because there's pressure to win. There's also pressure for them to find minutes for guys that are being paid lump sums of money. Mazzulla is afforded the opportunity to some of these guys, they're playing for an opportunity to find a seat at the table in the NBA. And maybe that kind of game, that heart, that kind of effort and, enthusiasm to come out and give your all at times gets masked because head coaches have a different agenda. Organizations have a different agenda. I truly believe that Mazzulla wants to see these guys actually come out and compete and play well. And he has been doing a masterful job, manipulating the roster to get the kind of results that he believes is best suited for what the Celtics are bringing to the table on a night in, night out basis. And you can't knock that, man. As crazy as he comes off at times. And, even you and I, we've shared our opinions about, how off kilter he can tend to be. It's not conventional basketball coaching, how he operates and stuff like that. And maybe he benefited off of the level of success that Udoka had with the roster that he came in with. Like, he inherited this opportunity to get to the championship. But these last couple of seasons, his high risk, high reward style of coaching has put him in a place where if now this is what we're seeing and how it's impacting the lower end of that aspect of it, you can buy into it.
No, you absolutely can. And, it's a no nonsense approach. So, like, guys who I was like, oh, well, for the price, not bad. Like, I think the Simons moves was good. Joe's not really rocking with Simons like that, as I alluded to. I mean, he's He's still averaging 13 a game because when he plays, decent minutes, but there's times he doesn't play at all. But even like Chris Boucher, was like, okay, well, that's a decent signing for like, to the veterans minimum, get him off Toronto, whatever. He's a guy who can space the floor if you still want to play that, 5-out style. Boucher is like non-existent. He played 8 games this year. So like Mazzulla's like, nah, bro, you not it either. And the fact that, again, the Minots and the Walshes of the world, Garza even are getting more opportunities, it speaks a lot. Even Hugo Gonzalez as a rookie, Mazzulla likes to fight. So like those guys who he thinks are going to fight and dig and claw, especially because they are undersized and they need to rebound, those are the guys he's going with, not necessarily because you have a name or you have X amount of years experience. Like, hey, you still got to go out there and kind of get it done. So I'm going to pivot our conversation slightly. It's kind of I don't want to get into a 2-part question. I'll ask my first question first is, do you think the Celtics now should be buyers going into December 15th, January 15th, and ultimately the trade deadline? Should they be buyers and trying to shore up that front court to be more competitive? Zubac aside, just do you think they should try to do something, in that space?
I absolutely do. I think because eventually you're going to have to address it, unless your intent is to try to address it through the draft, but it has to be addressed. And this could be a great opportunity to do that because most of the teams right now that are ahead of you or still in conversations, they have what they have for their front court, right? You have Mobley, right? You've got Duren, you've got Wagner and Banchero, you've got Towns, right? And then you've got Bridges. All of the good teams pretty much have their front court locked up. So there's going to be somebody who's, got front court players like an AD maybe or whatever. I know that we've had that conversation offline or whatever, that are probably shopping. They may think that they're going to get a king's ransom, but they may not get much. And the pressure of them still holding on to a player they're going to have to unload might position the Celtics quite nicely for them to go in and, offload some of the cap that they already have on some players that they're probably not even playing as much. It could be dead weight to another team for them. But then by getting that player sees what's going on, the culture, the feel, knowing that he's going to eventually have 2 all-NBA players on the roster if he chooses to re-up with them for an additional year. This could be the right time to do it rather than doing it knowing that if you were trying to do it next year or in the off season, that there may be slim pickings because there's already destinations that these guys are going to be sent to or are going to be thinking about other than Boston.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I think in terms of if they can, especially if they're not going to keep Simons, is it a matter of just like, do they get further under the tax by trying to offload him or whatever, or can they get real assets for him? To get assets, they're going to have to play him, and he's going to have to be showcased, I think, to some degree. But if you can find a team that's like, hey, you know what, he's on an expiring, we'll take him just so that we're not committed, and figure out what else they can extrapolate from Boston. I think that's the move that's worth making, especially if it can shore up, like I said, specifically their front court. Maybe they can utilize another wing behind Jaylen, and if you consider Derek White, who sometimes plays up to some degree. But I really think they need to address the front court situation to get some help for Keita and maybe move Keita into a more natural kind of coming off the bench big role. But either way, I think Boston should be making moves to improve their standing, because I think they're kind of almost too good to fail in the way that maybe some of us thought they might have going into the season. And with the proof that we have so far, then if you're going to do it, then you don't want to be just like truly average. Like, you have a chance to really try to fight. So fight in the Eastern Conference, and then see where that takes you.
Yeah, the Celtics are in a rare situation where they are so deep, right, with good core players, and that's probably a good problem to have. They're just they're the output of what those guys can give you are not at the level of what the top tier teams, like the Denver Nuggets, or the New York Knicks or the Oklahoma City Thunder, or maybe even say like the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? Like, they've got players, they've got a bench, they've got depth. But this is a good problem of depth to have because all of them are quality players that can be packaged if the intent is you're trying to elevate and upgrade, and you can do it sooner rather than later. We'll see if that's what the mentality is by Brad Stevens. I at least, will say if there's an executive who I have confidence in making a play that is to better serve the team as best as possible, I lean into Brad Stevens, given what he's had to work with in this 3-year window of his at that role, that he's done a really, really good job, and people can question it as much as they want to. He tried to squeeze 2 championships out of the rosters that he had and still managed to figure out a way to get this team relatively close to being, out of that, getting them out of the tier 2, right? The apron to a second apron. It's just, again, you want that same kind of guy with that same kind of headiness, thinking forward about how this team can be improved while nobody's paying attention or watching.
Yeah, I only push back is like, I don't think they're that deep. I think they have a bunch of scrappers and guys who are trying to, prove it for the first time or prove it because they've been cast off, in somewhere else, from Tillman to Boucher to even a guy like Minot who was from Minnesota. I think Hauser is maybe not as good as they want him to be or has been in years past, but they all seem to fit. Not all, but a good amount of them fit what, Mazzulla is asking them to do. I don't know that these guys go out there and do this and have the same level of success and or would even garner any interest, from other teams out there. I think for me, it's Simons and Hauser to a lesser degree that might be able to help you bolster the rest of this roster. The rest of them, to me, I don't want to say system, but they are, Mazzulla-ish type guys because they're kind of grinding and trying hard per se. And that's not always a tradable asset. It's like people like, yeah, you want guys who are going to play hard for you, but it's like, what are you willing to give up for that? And I don't know if there's a lot of equity in some of those other guys there. Like, who's trading for Jordan Walsh? Jordan Walsh has made a nice name for himself early in the season, but who's going, oh, yeah, let me go trade for that. I think it's just because of what Simons and Hauser present, at least even in theory, that presents more value to the Celtics trying to improve their roster with one of those guys, as opposed to some of the other names on the team.
I get you. I'm not, and I think maybe in a way, maybe I should reframe the wording. I'm not saying that all of them did, like all of these guys are tradable. What I'm saying is that the effort and some teams might take a chance and roll a dice in doing that because of how they're exhibiting that style. It's not guaranteed. And if you are the Boston Celtics and you're competitive, like top 5 or whatever the case may be, obviously no other team is going to basically lend the idea of giving up a good player to elevate your Boston Celtics. However, if you're a team that is kind of like in the middle and you're thinking forward and there's a way that you can make a play to package guys like in, they think that they can help somewhere else, try somewhere else, offload contracts somewhere else like that. Yeah, you do it now rather than assuming that giving them all those minutes and having them play through the season and stuff like that, they're going to be able to go find themselves on their own and you're going to figure out a way to move them on their own. I'm just saying that, like, there's a lot of players on this roster that there's some chances and opportunities in other places they could probably help fill up some depth, right? Some injury-riddled team, you could throw a guy out there and you can get usable minutes from them if the intent is that, hey, the Celtics are in the market to get, they got a player you want, and then they got a few players that you could probably use and throw out there and stuff like that if you absolutely need to, which is hard pressed considering the fact that when you look at the depth chart on a lot of other teams, it's pretty slim pickings. So
I'll close by this, just as we've talked about the Lakers and the Celtics, which team I think is more surprising to you that they are where they are? I think currently, as I think both teams have slightly overachieved. Maybe some people wouldn't say that for the Lakers, given, the Luka and LeBron factor. Maybe some people saw Austin Reaves coming. But from your lens, which one of these two teams are you surprised to see, in the seeding that they are currently today?
No question, the Celtics. And it's not because the other teams in the Eastern Conference are taking a step down. It's because I've actually seen improvement in quite a number of players that I just didn't even think were going to have any minutes on the basketball court. That's just me. And I don't know how Again, I don't know how long and how sustainable this is. I can only hope that Jaylen Brown stays healthy to produce the way that he's producing. But I also am very impressed with the way Mazzulla has utilized that roster, and to get the kind of effort and minutes and productivity from those role players, again, has lent itself to the Celtics being as good as they've been at this point. So, yeah, they're the ones who surprised me the most.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Lakers with the star power. Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that they'd be above a Denver or even a Houston, but the fact that they are is again, it's surprising, but again, not like impossible. I think Boston's run, especially the way the season started, I was like, oh boy, this is worse than I thought it was gonna be. And then all of a sudden they've turned things around. And so I think Mazzulla's done an amazing job here, and not really getting much consideration at this point because we're only 25 games are into the season. But if this keeps up, he would have to be a coach of the year candidate, and I think Jaylen Brown would be able to sneak into the top 5 of MVP voting. And I think, again, hear me when I say this, top 5, not that he's going to be the MVP. He's not going to get votes that, SGA and Joker will get. But if the Celtics continue to be a top 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, I think he can sneak into that conversation, because he is truly the head of the snake in Boston right now, averaging almost 30 a game, 5 dimes, 6 boards, nice efficiency from 3, I think 36% from the 3-point line. Jaylen Brown's having a hell of a season.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. And to me, the crowning moment will probably be him getting that All-NBA, the elusive All-NBA.
He's got it before. He got it.
He's had it before. Oh, damn! I was trying to big him up on that. trying to give him some, some real classy kudos, man. That don't get to do that too often, man. He's been stamped as the sidekick too much. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he finagled that quite nicely.
Well, he made All-NBA. So, I mean, hey, that's how the sausage is made.
This is true. Anyway, great show, my man, and good conversations, regarding the Lakers and the Celtics. And get at us. Let us know, man. Are you aptly surprised between these two teams and what they're accomplishing thus far in the early part of the NBA season? I know we are, so we want to hear from you as well, too. Once again, man, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.